Estimates have differed widely as to just how much the French Revolution was caused by that across the ocean. Certain it is that Frenchmen had been enthusiastic in America's cause, that many of their officers fought under Washington and returned home deeply infused with devotion to liberty. It has long been a popular error, encouraged by historians of a former generation, that the French Revolution arose from a starving peasantry driven to madness by intolerable oppression. We know better now. It was in Paris, not in the provinces, that the revolt began. Judged by modern standards, of course, the French peasantry were oppressed, but if we measure their condition by that of surrounding nations at the time, by the Austrians under kind-hearted Maria Theresa, or even by the Prussians under Frederick the Great, most advanced of the upholders of benevolent despotism, in whose lands serfs were still sold with the soil. Compared with these, Frenchmen were free, prosperous, and happy. It is even true that the lower classes were unready for change. In Hungary, Joseph II, son of Maria Theresa, attempted a complete and radical reform of all abuses, and the mob rose in fury against his innovations, compelled him to restore their ancient customs. They had grown familiar with their chains. The French Revolution was an uprising of the middle classes. Its great leaders in the earlier stages were Mirabeau, son of a baron, and America's own friend, the Marquis Lafayette. Even the king, Louis XVI, at least partly approved the movement. The States General was summoned in 1789, after an interval of nearly 2 centuries, to decide on the best way of relieving the country from its financial embarrassments. This gathering was soon resolved into a National Assembly which insisted on giving France a constitution, making it a limited instead of an absolute monarchy. On the 14th of July, the mob of Paris rose in sudden fury and stormed the ancient state prison, the Bastille. The king sent no troops to resist them, and from that time his power was but a shadow. His overthrow, however, was not yet contemplated. But alas, reason was soon to lose control. The lower classes had wakened to a sense of their power. They began to use it savagely. Hatred of the haughty aristocracy, long smouldering Bagcardis, burst everywhere into flame. Mobs of country peasants plundered isolated chateaux and slew their inmates. Meanwhile, the National Assembly had been abolishing all titles of nobility. The vast estates of the clergy were confiscated. The aristocrats began fleeing from France, and the possessions of all who fled were declared forfeited to the new government. Imagine the tumult that this upheaval caused to the rest of Europe. News traveled slowly in those days, but these émigrés, these banished nobles, were palpable evidences of what had occurred. The common folk everywhere, especially along the French borders in Germany, Switzerland, and Italy, celebrated the French triumph as their own. Liberty was at hand. For them too it would come presently. Murmurings of revolt grew loud. The monarchs of Europe, terrified, took up the cause of the émigrés as their own. France was threatened with invasion. King Louis threw in his lot with his royal friends and attempted flight from Paris. He was caught and brought back a prisoner. A foreign army marched against France. For this invasion was met and repelled in the Battle of Valmy, 1792. Not an extensive or bloody contest in itself, but one of incalculable importance in human history, because like Bunker Hill, it showed that a new force had arisen to upset all the military calculations of the past. Raw troops could now be found to meet on equal terms with veterans. Liberty, hitherto an impalpable idea, a mere phantom in the brains of a few philosophers, proved able to call up armies at a word, able physically to hold its own against embattled despotism. Even the German Goethe wrote of Valmy, "In this place and on this day, a new era of the world begins." France, however, had already gone mad with its success. Even before Valmy, wholesale murder had begun in Paris. The prisons were broken open, and 1,000 aristocrats hideously butchered without trial. The day after Valmy, the land was proclaimed a republic. King Louis was put on trial for his life, and in January 1793 was executed. Frenchmen began fighting among themselves. The reign of terror began as that of kings was abolished. Chiefs of each faction accused all others as traitors, and executions by the guillotine rose to 50 a day. "We must have 100, cried Robespierre, the lunatic leader of the moment. The excesses in Paris roused civil war, and through all France men slew one another in the name of liberty. In Brittany, the peasants even rose in support of royalty and refused allegiance to the Republic. Never has the most hideous brutality of man been more openly displayed than in those days of vengeance. The intellectual classes of Europe everywhere shrank back, terrified at the spectre they had evoked. The Reign of Terror ended in 1794 with the downfall and execution of its leader, Robespierre. The civil war was trampled out in Blücher, and with titanic energy the French Republic defended itself against its foreign foes. All Europe had joined in a coalition against France, all the kings, that is. Their subjects still doubted, still hoped, still looked anxiously to France to see if freedom were in truth a possibility. Then, from the ranks of the liberated French, arose great generals, aristocrats no longer, but men of the people, fitted to lead the newborn armies of the people. Greatest of these and grimmest of them was Napoleon Bonaparte. He taught the timorous legislative authorities of Paris how to reassert their dominion over King Mob, who had ruled them and the country for 4 hideous years. He checked a new uprising by a discharge of well-stationed cannon aimed to kill. Order being thus established at home, the French began to pour over the border in attack upon those kings who had threatened them. In many places, they were still received as the apostles of liberty. Holland, Switzerland, the Rhinelands became allies or dependents of France. Kings were helpless against them. To the spirit of republicanism, to the impassioned courage of Frenchmen, was added the genius of Bonaparte. He conquered Italy, he plundered her, and sent home priceless treasures to delight his countrymen and fill their exhausted treasury. He became the man of the hour. Far beyond France spread the influence of her example. In Eastern Europe, Poland was roused against the despoilers who had already seized a portion of her territory. She began a rebellion under Kosciuszko, who, like Lafayette, had imbibed the love of freedom in America. But Poland was crushed by the overpowering forces of Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Her remaining provinces were divided among the plunderers, and the last fragment of her independence was extinguished.